A stormy night, a beaten-up sedan with a weary mother behind the wheel, and a lonely mechanic's garage standing as the only beacon of refuge in the relentless downpour. Tonight, fates will collide and transform two lives forever, when Henry Pierce, a small-town mechanic who's drowning in debt and heartbreak, sees Grace Thompson, desperately seeking shelter for her and her little daughter. He welcomes her into his humble garage without hesitation. Little does he know this single act of kindness will spark a series of life-altering events. Brace yourself for the twists and turns of a tale about compassion, resilience, and the surprising power of second chances. Henry Pierce had never planned on staying in the quiet town of Fairhaven, North Carolina. Growing up near Winston-Salem, he once dreamed of escaping to a big city, maybe Atlanta, where bright lights and constant motion could breathe excitement into his life. But fate had other ideas. He inherited his grandfather's auto shop, Pierce's Garage, when he was only 19. Instead of walking away from the responsibility, Henry shouldered it, determined to keep alive the legacy left behind by the man who taught him how to fix cars and fix them right. But Pierce's Garage was not the thriving business it used to be. The economy in Fairhaven had slowed, and big auto repair franchises had muscled in. Where Henry's grandfather once saw lines of customers, Henry saw crickets. Most days, he managed to scrape by fixing the cars of old loyal patrons, people like Mrs. Franklin, who'd been a friend of his late grandfather for decades, or Mr. Baker, who still believed in honest local service. Those small jobs helped Henry cover rent and buy groceries on a good week. On a bad week, Henry found himself dodging calls from the electric company and rummaging for spare change to fill up his own pickup truck. He was used to it now, being broke, being tired, being alone. For years he tried to hide the shame in silence. When he couldn't afford to pay for a night out with his then-fiancée, Rebecca, guilt gnawed at him like a constant bitter aftertaste. Eventually, the tension ripped them apart. One night, she drove away and never came back. Henry was left not just with heartbreak, but also a vow to never let anyone else down if he could help it. And so on that gloomy autumn evening, his life on the ropes felt especially weighty. Rain battered the old tin roof of Pierce's garage, and Henry suspected a leak had started in the waiting area. The clock on the wall read past 7 p.m., and he was alone again. Just him, the hum of the fluorescent light above, and the rhythmic drip of water in a plastic bucket on the floor. Another day gone, another day, with hardly enough business. Another day spent hoping tomorrow might be different. Beyond the garage's large bay doors, lightning occasionally snapped across the sky, illuminating the empty streets. Henry sighed, preparing to lock up, shutting the heavy metal shutters on the front windows. That's when he saw headlights approaching through the haze of driving rain. A battered blue sedan, belching black smoke, hobbled into the lot. Henry's heart jumped. A new customer this late. He frowned, worried that the driver might need more help than he could give that night. The sedan lurched forward, then ground to a stop. As Henry hurried outside, battered by gale-force gusts, he saw a woman at the wheel. Her wide eyes were full of relief when they locked onto him. Her name, he soon learned, was Grace Thompson. And within minutes, Henry Pierce's life was about to be changed forever. Grace had the air of a person who'd been running on sheer adrenaline. From the trembling way she gripped the steering wheel to the anxiety dancing in her eyes, Henry deduced that this wasn't just an ordinary pit stop. When he bent down to peer through the window water streaming off the hood of his jacket, Grace's lips quivered. "Car's making a terrible noise," she said, voice shaking. And then the windshield wipers. They just stopped. I didn't know where else to go. Are you still open? Henry offered a warm smile. Open enough. Let's get you inside. He popped the hood while Grace stepped out, holding a small, shivering child in her arms, her daughter Emma, who clung to her mother's neck like a frightened kitten. The girl's eyes darted around, taking in the unfamiliar sights of the dark lot, the neon sign flickering overhead, and the man in a soaked jacket. Henry found himself feeling an unexpected pang in his chest. He'd never had kids, but something about this vulnerable pair tugged at his guarded heart. Once in the garage, Henry turned on extra lights so they wouldn't feel so uneasy. The space was modest. A single lift, a metal workbench dotted with tools, and a waiting area that boasted a coffee machine that only worked half the time. The chairs in the corner had seen better days. Nonetheless, it was at least dry and a far cry better than the raging storm outside. Grace paced, trying to calm Emma, while Henry grabbed a toolkit and a flashlight. "You'll just make yourselves comfortable," he suggested, moving toward the sedan to see what was wrong. Rain pelted him as he worked outside, quickly diagnosing the problem as a busted serpentine belt and some electrical issues. This car needed more time and parts than he had at that moment. Drenched. Henry returned to see Grace sitting stiffly on one of the threadbare chairs. Emma was curled in her lap, dozing off. "I'm sorry," Henry told her gently, "but that car won't be running tonight. I can fix it in the morning if I call in a favor for the parts. Tonight, though, you might need a place to stay." He flicked his gaze toward the storm-lashed windows. "There's a motel a couple miles down the road." Grace's face fell. "I'm not sure I can afford a motel right now," she confessed. Her cheeks reddened as if the admission itself pained her. "We were on our way to see family in Charlotte. Didn't expect the weather to turn so bad. And I lost my job last month." Henry swallowed. He knew that kind of desperation all too well. Rubbing the back of his neck, he glanced around the dim garage. "Well, I've got a little cot in the break room left over from nights when I work too late and can't drive home. You're welcome to stay here for the night," he offered, voice hesitant. "I know it's not ideal, but at least it's warm and safe. The storm might calm by morning." Grace looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. Relief, exhaustion, gratitude. Her expression blended them all. "Are you sure I don't want to trouble you?" Henry shrugged in that unassuming way he often did. "It's no trouble," he said, though his chest felt tight. He rarely had visitors in his domain, certainly not overnight guests. But something about Grace and Emma. Maybe it was the fear in the little girl's eyes made him want to do whatever he could. "I'll grab some blankets. The break room might not be the Ritz, but it's private, and you can lock the door if you feel safer that way." Grace nodded, choking out a thank you, while tears threatened to spill. As Henry rummaged for blankets and extra clothes, he could feel an odd stirring of hope inside him, like maybe for the first time in a long time, there was some purpose shining through the cracks of his life. Outside, thunder rumbled and lightning flickered. The storm wouldn't give them a peaceful night. But inside Pierce's garage, empathy and kindness offered a refuge stronger than any weather. The wind howled through the cracks in the garage doors as the rain pounded relentlessly. Inside the break room, really, just a small side office with a kitchenette, an old couch, and a stained table. Grace tucked Emma into the cot Henry had set up. Henry, in turn, set himself on the ragged couch, determined to let the mother and child have what little comfort was available. For a while, silence reigned, save for the dripping of Henry's jacket as it hung from a hook by the door. Emma had drifted off, lulled by the pattering of rain. Grace, however, stared at the ceiling wide awake, lost in thought. Henry pretended not to notice that she was on edge, but eventually her ragged breathing and the quiet sniffles became impossible to ignore. He sat up, wrestling with whether to offer her comfort or give her space. Something about her vulnerability made him feel protective, so he cleared his throat gently in a way that would not startle her too much. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay over there?" Grace sat up slowly, as if she had been waiting for permission to speak. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice tight with unshed tears. I can't believe I'm in this situation. Driving in a storm, no money for a motel, and now relying on a complete stranger's kindness." Henry reached for the single lamp on the table and turned it on, bathing them in a warm, soft glow. He could see her face more clearly now. Brown hair plastered to her cheeks, exhaustion etched into every line around her eyes. Yet there was a certain softness, a kindness in her gaze. "It's not your fault," Henry responded, shaking his head. "Bad luck. Could have happened to anyone." She exhaled, then laughed bitterly. "I've had a lot of bad luck lately. Lost my job at a small accounting firm after it went under. I'm behind on rent. My sister can't help me financially because she's got her own family to feed. And Emma's father, well, we've been on our own for a while." Her voice trembled. "I was on my way to Charlotte. My Aunt Linda Morris said she might have a lead on a job there. I don't know if I'm making the right choices anymore." Henry nodded in empathy, though a pang of familiar sadness twisted in his chest. He recalled how he had once felt when bills piled up and possibilities seemed to vanish. Sometimes he offered the only choice is to keep moving forward. Grace studied his face. She noticed the lines of weariness around his eyes. She picked up on the sadness behind his comforting smile. "What about you?" she asked quietly. "Why are you here so late, alone, in this garage?" Henry hesitated. He didn't usually spill his life story to strangers, and yet looking at Grace he felt that old desire to unburden himself. The storm outside seemed to wrap them in an isolated bubble of trust. "I own this place," he began. "Inherited it from my grandfather. When he passed, I was 19. I dropped out of community college and took over. It's been tough, especially with the bigger franchises around. Sometimes there isn't enough work." He paused as if summoning courage. "Had a fiancé once, but money troubles got too big. It fell apart." Grace's eyes shimmered with understanding. "I'm sorry," she murmured. He shrugged, forcing a small smile. "It's life. I know I'm lucky to have this place at all. Some folks don't have anywhere to go." He glanced toward Emma. The girl was sleeping soundly, her tiny fist wrapped in the blanket's edge. "Just wish I could do more to help." Grace swallowed. "You're already doing more than most would. Letting us stay here in your own space." Silence fell again, but this time it was more peaceful. The wind still shrieked, and the roof rattled under the assault of the storm. Yet Henry and Grace somehow found a strange sense of solace in each other's company. For one night, they shared their stories, their quiet burdens and fears. And though it was only the first chapter of something much bigger, neither of them knew how drastically their lives would intertwine from that point forward. Eventually, Grace drifted off to sleep beside Emma. Henry stayed awake a bit longer, propped on his worn couch, thinking about how chance encounters can alter life in an instant. That battered blue sedan had brought him not just extra work, but also a moment of human connection he sorely needed, though he'd never admit it. The storm, with its furious blasts, might have been a curse to some, but for Henry Pierce, it was quietly becoming the catalyst of an unexpected blessing. Morning arrived as a pale, tentative glow on the horizon, the storm having retreated to a distant rumble. Henry was up first, rubbing the stiffness from his neck. He checked on Grace, and Emma found them both still asleep and decided to slip outside and see what he could do about her car. His breath formed a small cloud in the chilly morning air as he rolled up the garage doors. The battered sedan gleamed dully with rainwater droplets. It had seen better days. Splotches of rust covered the wheel wells, the tires were nearly bald, and the interior was likely water-damaged. Yet Henry couldn't help but admire its resilience. Even in its condition, it had carried Grace and Emma this far. He set to work. A new serpentine belt, an alternator test, some fresh windshield wipers. The hours ticked by, interrupted only by a quick trip to the local auto parts store where his old friend Kevin Henderson worked. Kevin gave Henry a discount on the belt, exchanging banter about how Henry always ended up fixing lost causes. Henry laughed it off, not revealing that this time it felt different. By the time the sun stood high in the sky, the sedan was in a much better state, albeit still far from perfect. He hoped it would get Grace and Emma safely to Charlotte, at least. Henry shut the hood, just as he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw Grace now wearing a borrowed flannel shirt from Henry, since her own clothes were damp, and her jeans from the night before. Emma stood close to her, clinging to her mother's hand. The girl looked up at Henry with big, round eyes. Cars almost good as new, Henry greeted them with a smile, wiping his hands on a rag. "You'll be able to drive out whenever you're ready." Grace bit her lip, taking in the hours of labor Henry must have spent. "Thank you, Henry. I don't know how I can repay you. We barely have gas money, let alone enough to pay for all this." Henry forced a shrug, trying to appear nonchalant. "Don't worry about it right now. Let's call it a delayed invoice. Pay me when you can." Grace looked at the ground, tears threatening once more. She was clearly touched she'd encountered her fair share of unscrupulous mechanics who would capitalize on her desperation. Here was a man who not only helped her for free, but had let them sleep in his own workspace. In that moment, she felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. "Still," she said quietly, "I'll find a way. I promise." Henry nodded, letting the conversation move on. He wasn't the type to press. "Any luck getting in touch with your aunt in Charlotte?" he asked, changing the subject. Grace shook her head. "My phone died last night, and I didn't bring a charger. If it's okay, maybe I can use your shop phone to see if she can still host us for a bit." "Of course," he said. "It's inside." Leaving Emma to wander around the shop's waiting area under Henry's gentle watch, Grace found the landline in the cramped front office. She dialed her aunt, biting her lower lip as she waited for an answer. "Aunt Linda," she said. Finally. Henry, leaning on the doorframe, watched as Grace's face fell. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he guessed it wasn't going well. Her shoulders sagged. "No, I understand. Maybe next time. Okay, bye." She hung up, staring at the phone for a moment, before turning to Henry. She can't help right now. Some emergency came up with her own bills, and she said the position she was hoping to get me fell through. They're just not hiring. Henry's stomach sank. "So what will you do?" Grace swallowed hard, glancing at Emma through the glass panel, seeing her child's innocent curiosity as she tried to identify various car parts in the waiting area. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Go back to my sister's in Raleigh. Beg for a few nights on her couch, maybe. But she's got 2 kids of her own and a tiny apartment." She twisted her fingers together in a gesture of helplessness. Something inside Henry trembled with compassion. He didn't have much to offer either, but watching Grace's determination to give Emma a better life stirred memories of what his grandfather would have done. The old man never hesitated to open his doors to those in need. Henry took a deep breath. "Look, maybe it's a crazy idea, but if you need a bit more time to figure things out, you can stay here in Fairhaven for a week or 2. I mean, not in the garage," he added quickly, "but I have a small house on the edge of town. Spare room. It's not fancy, but you 2 wouldn't be out on the streets." Grace's eyes widened, confusion and relief mingling. "You'd do that for us? But you..." He held up a hand. "We can figure out a small rent or something if it makes you more comfortable. Or pay me back later once you get on your feet." The words spilled out before he had a chance to question them. Part of him was terrified of letting anyone into his personal sanctuary again. Another part believed with unwavering certainty that this was the right thing to do. Grace glanced back at Emma again, eyes brimful of maternal love. She turned to Henry. I don't know what to say." "Say yes." Henry offered a gentle smile. "At least until you have a better plan." She met his eyes, then nodded as tears shimmered. "Yes," she breathed. "Thank you, Henry." At that moment, an unseen miracle seemed to blossom in the dusty corners of Pierce's garage, a flicker of hope. Perhaps it was the start of better days for both Henry Pierce and Grace Thompson, as they each discovered that sometimes in the midst of hardships, kindness is the seed of unexpected change. 3 days later, Grace and Emma were living in Henry's modest house, a small 2-bedroom place built on the outskirts of Fairhaven. The yard was untamed with a crooked mailbox that still bore Henry's grandfather's name in fading letters, J. Pierce. Inside the furniture was mismatched, the walls adorned with old family photos and the occasional sports team poster. It was no luxury suite, but it was a genuine home, one that Henry had inhabited in lonely silence for too long. Emma took the smaller bedroom, which previously served as Henry's makeshift storage. Grace offered to sleep on the couch, but Henry insisted she take the master bedroom instead, since he'd grown accustomed to the couch anyway. She refused at first, but Henry's earnestness eventually wore down her arguments. After all, a mother needed privacy and a proper bed. Emma's laughter filled the halls as she discovered the novelty of having her own little space to play with her stuffed bunny Daisy. It was an adjustment for all of them. Henry discovered that having housemates meant grocery lists needed expansion, more breadfruit, snacks, milk for Emma's cereal. He rearranged his schedule, picking Emma up from a local daycare if Grace had to make phone calls for potential jobs. Meanwhile, Grace's guilt about imposing on Henry weighed on her. She insisted on cooking meals and tidying up. She scrubbed windows that probably hadn't seen a wash in years. She even tackled Henry's stack of neglected bills. He blushed, explaining that it was just a few things he'd gotten behind on, but she suspected it was more dire. Almost daily, Henry would shuffle into the house, exhausted face smeared with grease after hours spent at Pierce's garage. His days hadn't suddenly become financially prosperous. Business was still sporadic at best, but now there was a warmth in coming home that he hadn't felt in ages. Coming home meant hearing Emma shriek Henry's back from down the hall as she scampered to greet him. It meant Grace's gentle smile as she offered him a plate of dinner, asking about his day. The silence that once suffocated him had been replaced by the hum of domestic life. And oddly enough, Henry found he didn't mind it at all. Of course, not all was smooth sailing. One evening, a confrontation brewed. Emma had come down with a fever, and Grace couldn't afford the medication. Henry offered to pay, but she refused. She didn't want to take any more handouts. They argued, voices hushed, so as not to disturb Emma, who was asleep in her room. "Grace, I'm not trying to make you feel indebted," Henry insisted, trying to keep his tone calm. "I just want Emma to get better. She needs medicine." Grace's arms were crossed defensively. "And I don't want you to keep shelling out money you don't have. Your bills are overdue, Henry." He looked away, jaw clenched. "How do you—" "I saw the past due notices," she whispered. "I was putting some letters aside for you, and I saw them. Henry, I can't let you go deeper into debt because of us." He exhaled slowly, tension radiating in the dimly lit living room. He realized how pride could stand in the way of genuine help. Here she was, a guest in his home, worrying about his finances instead of focusing on her child's well-being. They both carried burdens that weighed heavily on their shoulders. Finally, Henry stepped forward. Gently, he placed a hand on her forearm. "Grace," he said, voice trembling just slightly. "Let me do this. For Emma. Please." Grace stared at him, tears forming. She didn't speak for a moment, but the shield around her seemed to soften. She nodded slowly, looking down to hide the emotional storm in her eyes. "Okay," she whispered, "but I'll pay you back. Somehow." He gave a faint smile. "Deal." Despite financial stress, that moment sealed a new bond. They both realized they were fighting similar battles, a shortage of money, the fear of failing the ones they cared about, the instinct to carry burdens alone. It wasn't perfect life, rarely is. But for the first time, Henry felt the corner of his existence brightening. And in Grace's eyes there was an echo of hope that maybe she had finally found a reason to believe in kindness again. Days turned into a couple of weeks. Grace spent her time helping Henry in the garage whenever she could, answering phones, organizing spare parts, cleaning. It wasn't much, but Henry appreciated it. He needed an extra pair of hands, especially when bigger repair jobs stumbled in. As time passed, Henry noticed something peculiar about Grace. Though she never flaunted anything, he caught glimpses of a confidence that went beyond her present hardships. She had a keen understanding of finance. He realized this when she casually mentioned how to rearrange his garage's accounting system to better manage expenses. Initially, Henry doubted he had enough money to manage in the first place, but Grace's suggestions were surprisingly practical. One afternoon, as Emma napped in Henry's office, Grace gently approached him with a manila folder in hand. "Henry, could I show you something?" she asked. Curiosity piqued, he set aside the tire he was patching. "Sure." "What's up?" She opened the folder. Inside were documents neatly tabbed and highlighted. "I know you're behind on some payments, and business at the garage is unpredictable," she began carefully. "But you have a good reputation in Fairhaven, and people trust you, especially the older folks who remember your grandfather. I have an idea that might help you grow the business." He leaned in. "I'm listening." Grace pointed to a list of potential services. "You could expand beyond basic repairs, offer roadside assistance packages, partner with local towing companies, so that Pierce's garage is the first recommended location. I've done some research on local demographics, and found that a lot of small businesses around here rely on their own trucks. They might be more willing to support a local garage that offers fleet services. Henry stared at her in awe. Where was all this coming from? He'd never had the resources or energy to plan an expansion, always hustling just to keep afloat. That sounds ambitious. I don't even have the equipment for some of those jobs, he admitted. Grace nodded. Which is why you'd need funding. But think about it as an investment if you could get a small loan, or... He shook his head. I've tried. The bank won't lend me more until I clear some of my existing debt. Grace closed the folder gently. I understand, she murmured, a resigned look crossing her features. It's just, you've helped me and Emma so much. I hate seeing your business struggle. Henry sensed a certain disappointment in her eyes. He reached out and squeezed her hand, ignoring the spark that shot through him at the brief contact. I appreciate this, Grace. I really do. Maybe someday, if business picks up. Grace swallowed a sigh and smiled. Right. Someday. Later that same afternoon, an older man came into the shop in a panic. His truck had broken down on the edge of town. He was the owner of a small construction company with a fleet of pickup trucks. Henry worked tirelessly to fix the problem, while Grace took note of the man's concerns about future maintenance. By the end of the day, not only had Henry fixed the truck, but Grace had also set up an appointment for the rest of the fleet to come in for routine checks. It was a big win, one that gave Henry a glimmer of hope for the first time in years. That night, with Emma asleep in her room, Henry and Grace sat at the kitchen table celebrating with cups of instant hot chocolate. The excitement lit up Grace's face. You see, she said softly, people need a trusted mechanic here. With just a bit more capital, you could really grow. Henry grinned, feeling a surprising surge of optimism. You might be right. A knock at the door startled them. Henry frowned. He rarely got visitors, especially after dark. Rising from his chair, he opened the door to find a man in a crisp suit, water droplets on his shoulders from the light drizzle outside. Good evening, Henry Pierce, the man asked. Yes, Henry replied, confused. I'm Michael Carlyle, the visitor said, handing him a business card. I'm here on behalf of the Carter Foundation. May I come in? Henry hesitated, glancing at Grace, who had approached behind him. She gave him an equally puzzled look, but shrugged. Sure, Henry said, stepping aside. Michael Carlyle entered, casting his gaze around the modest living room. He seemed polite, but there was an air of importance around him that put Henry on edge. He looked to Grace, then back to Henry. I apologize for the unannounced visit, Mr. Pierce, but I'm looking for Ms. Grace Thompson. It's a matter of considerable urgency. Grace's eyes widened. How did you find me? I never gave anyone this address. Michael smiled politely, though his tone carried authority. My employer, Mr. John Carter, has quite a few resources. He'd like very much to speak with you, Ms. Thompson. He turned to Henry. If this is an inconvenient time, I can... No, Grace interrupted. It's okay. Let's talk in the living room. A tension settled as they all gathered, sipping the remnants of hot chocolate. Emma mercifully was still asleep, unaware of the strange visitor. Michael opened a folder he'd been carrying, scanning it quickly. Mr. Carter asked me to offer you a position. Ms. Thompson, Michael began. He's well aware of your background in accounting and finance. He's also aware you've had a bit of difficulty recently. But he believes that your skills would be invaluable to his philanthropic foundation. Grace's face went pale, then red. Mr. Carter. You mean John Carter from Charlotte? The billionaire who invests in local businesses and non-profits. Michael nodded. Yes, he has philanthropic arms in Raleigh, Charlotte, and across the state. He came across your credentials through a mutual acquaintance. You must have made quite an impression in your previous firm. With that, he flipped a page. He also knows about your current circumstances, including your need for stable employment and your personal situation. Henry noticed Grace's hands trembling on her lap. Something about this unsettled him. Someone powerful enough to track her down here in Henry's modest home meant Grace's life was about to change drastically. But how Grace cleared her throat. What exactly is he offering? Michael's demeanor softened. A full-time position at the Carter Foundation focusing on community redevelopment grants. The salary would be substantial, and Mr. Carter is also prepared to offer transitional housing near the foundation headquarters in Charlotte, as well as immediate support for your child's needs. Henry felt a jolt. This was everything Grace had been hoping for. It meant security, a new beginning. But part of him churned with an unexpected sadness if she left the bright spark that had returned to his home would vanish. He forced a smile, swallowing the sting of selfishness. That's incredible news, he managed, turning to Grace. She looked as if a whirlwind of emotions had seized her. Her eyes flicked from Henry to Michael. "Why would he do this for me?" she asked. Michael closed his folder, standing up. Mr. Carter admires talent and resilience. He believes in giving people a chance to shine, especially if they've encountered hardships. He's been known to do this sort of thing before, seek out individuals with promise, help them rebuild. He found out about your situation and your skill set. He wants you on his team. Grace pressed her lips together. Henry could see tears threatening to form. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Michael set a stack of papers on the coffee table. Review the contract and let us know. There's a number here you can call to arrange a meeting with Mr. Carter directly. Time is of the essence, though. He'd like to finalize his team by the end of next week. With that, Michael Carlyle bowed politely. "Have a good evening," he said. And then he slipped out the door as suddenly as he'd arrived. A heavy hush descended. Grace stared at the contract as if it were a coiled snake, both alluring and terrifying. Henry sank onto the couch, confusion and a bitter-sweet ache tangling inside him. For so long, his only dream had been to keep Pierce's garage afloat. Now, with Grace at his side, an even larger dream had started to take shape. But in one swift motion, the universe had handed her a ticket out of her troubles and possibly out of Henry's life. For days, the folder containing the Carter Foundation contract lay unopened on the coffee table. Grace seemed paralyzed, torn between a world of new possibilities and the small sense of belonging she'd finally found in Fairhaven. Henry likewise tiptoed around the subject, terrified he might appear selfish if he voiced the part of him that didn't want her to go. If Emma overheard any of their anxious discussions, she showed no sign she was busy enjoying the newfound sense of family that had blossomed in the little house. One evening after Grace had tucked Emma in, she found Henry hunched over the kitchen table, piles of papers spread around him. Bills, ledgers, receipts. He looked up at her eyes, weary but determined. "I'm trying that new accounting system you mentioned," he said. "Figured it's about time I take control of these finances." Grace gave him a gentle smile, moving closer to peer over his shoulder. "That's a good idea," she whispered. "I can help if you want." He hesitated, then slid a chair out for her. She sat down, taking a pencil and scribbling some quick calculations. In minutes, she reorganized rows of figures, showing Henry exactly how to track his accounts, payable versus receivable, how to allocate money for future repairs, and how to identify which services were truly profitable. Henry watched her in awe. "You're really good at this," he murmured. She shrugged. "It's just numbers," she said, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of pride. Their hands brushed as Henry reached for a piece of paper at the same time Grace did. A jolt of electricity passed between them, something that neither could deny anymore. Grace inhaled sharply, her cheeks flushing. Henry coughed, looking away, heart thudding. She glanced at the unopened contract on the coffee table. "Henry," she began quietly, "I haven't made a decision about that job yet." He swallowed. "You should take it," he said, forcing the words out. "It's everything you deserve. You could provide Emma with a stable home, good schools, a future." He tried to sound supportive, but inside he felt like his heart was sinking. Grace's gaze lingered on his face. She reached out tentatively, placing a hand over his. "And what about you?" He looked up, pain evident in his eyes. "Don't worry about me," he said softly. "I'll figure it out." "I am worried about you," she whispered. "You've been so kind to Emma and me. You gave us shelter, food, a sense of safety. You've made us feel like a family again." Her voice hitched. "I can't just leave without thinking this through. It's not just about a paycheck." Henry's chest tightened. A swirl of emotions churned, hope, fear, longing. He squeezed her hand gently, but words failed him. Finally, Grace continued. "When I look at Emma, and how happy she is here, I wonder if we can have that same happiness in Charlotte, or if maybe we belong somewhere else." Henry parted his lips about to speak, but she beat him to it. "I can't ask you to move with us," she said. "That's absurd. You have your garage, your life." "But still, I can't ignore this chance for a stable future. I'm torn, Henry." A tear slipped down her cheek, and Henry's heart lurched. He reached out, brushing it away with his thumb. "I know," he murmured. "It's okay to be torn. But I think you should go where you can make a better life for Emma. That's the most important thing." Silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. Grace searched Henry's face, feeling her heart clench. "I have until the end of this week to decide. Maybe I can meet Mr. Carter first, see what it's really about." Henry nodded, trying to keep his composure. "That sounds wise," he said. They lingered there, hands almost touching hearts, half broken by the thought of a goodbye that felt inevitable. Eventually, Grace withdrew, folding the contract into her arms. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Henry watched her go, a strange mixture of pride and sadness warring within him. He told himself that if he truly cared for Grace, he'd want her to have the best possible life, even if it meant letting her slip away, like water through his fingers. Still, a tiny voice inside him whispered that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't go. Maybe the intangible, unspoken bond they shared could trump all the money and security in the world. But as he watched her bedroom door close softly, he prepared himself for a reality where he might lose the brightest light that had graced his life in years. 2 days later, Grace traveled to Charlotte for a formal interview with John Carter himself. She borrowed Henry's pickup, leaving Emma in Henry's care for the day. He insisted on it, saying that Emma and he had important engine checking business at the garage. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about how entwined their lives had become. The drive to Charlotte was long, giving Grace too much time alone with her thoughts. What would Mr. Carter be like? What exactly did he see in her that warranted such a lavish job offer? Was there a catch? Her anxiety skyrocketed as she pulled into a gleaming high-rise in downtown Charlotte. The Carter Foundation logo, a stylized C in gold and teal, adorned the lobby. She met Michael Carlyle in person again, who guided her through security and up to the executive floor. The elevator doors opened onto plush carpeting glass walls and the hum of efficient air conditioning. It was a far cry from the squeaky floors and tangy oil smells of Pierce's garage. John Carter himself, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a warm handshake, greeted her in a spacious corner office overlooking the city. He wore a tailored suit but projected an approachable air. "Ms. Thompson," he said, his deep voice friendly. "Thank you for coming." Grace managed a small smile. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Carter." "I'm amazed, honestly." He waved off her awe. "Please call me John. I've reviewed your work at your previous firm. Word on the street is you kept them afloat far longer than anyone expected. You have a real gift for finding practical solutions under pressure." Grace blushed. "I tried my best. It just didn't work out in the end." He nodded sympathetically. "Sometimes even our best efforts can't save a sinking ship. But that's exactly why I want you here." He handed her a folder detailing the responsibilities overseeing grants to underserved communities, helping local businesses get back on their feet, ensuring funds were allocated wisely. "You'd be working with non-profit small startups and family businesses," he explained. "We need someone who can think on their feet and empathize with the struggles of the people we're trying to help. Someone with heart and know-how." Grace's eyes scanned the pages. It was everything she was good at: problem-solving, budgeting, connecting with real people. Her heart pounded at the prospect. "This is wonderful," she breathed. John leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "It also pays a competitive salary, includes health benefits for your child, and comes with transitional housing for the first 6 months. He studied her, a kind expression on his face. "I know you're currently in a tough spot. That's not a secret. I believe in giving people a hand up, not a handout. Will you accept, Ms. Thompson?" Tears threatened at the corners of Grace's eyes. It was almost too good to be true, a dream job that let her help others while stabilizing her own life. And yet her thoughts drifted to Henry back in Fairhaven. The smell of grease in the garage, Emma laughing as she handed him tools. Henry's gentle smile each time he greeted them. "I have one question," Grace said softly. "Fairhaven. It's home to a lot of struggling businesses, including one run by the man who's helped me through this rough patch. Is there any chance the Carter Foundation might consider expansions or partnerships outside Charlotte, like, say, investing in a small-town garage with huge potential?" John tilted his head curiously. "Tell me more." And so Grace did. She told him about Henry Pierce, about his grandfather's legacy, about the fleet services plan, and the potential for growth. She even showed him some of the accounting she'd done, her eyes gleaming with pride for Henry's work ethic and honesty. By the time she finished, John was smiling. "You're quite passionate about this Pierce's garage," he noted. Grace flushed. "It saved me and my daughter from a storm, literally and figuratively. Henry saved us. I just want him to have a chance, too." John took the paperwork, scanning the figures. After a pause, he said, "We rarely invest directly in for-profit businesses unless they're crucial to a community's well-being. But a reliable local garage can be a lifeline in smaller towns. Let's set up a meeting with Henry. If the numbers make sense and if you join our foundation, I don't see why we can't make an exception and provide some seed funding. It might be a perfect pilot project under our new Rural Redevelopment Initiative." Grace's heart soared. "Thank you. I thank you," she repeated, struggling to articulate her gratitude. John stood, offering his hand. "It's the least I can do, especially for the right candidate. I hope to see you soon, Ms. Thompson, officially as part of our team." Leaving the office, Grace felt like she was walking on clouds. Her mind whirled with the possibilities, a chance to help Henry, while also stabilizing her own life and Emma's future. Maybe she didn't have to choose between them after all. She clutched the signed preliminary agreement to her chest, eyes shining, determined to rush home and share the news with the man who had given her hope when she had none. When Grace pulled up to Pierce's garage later that afternoon, the scene was familiar. Henry's silhouette stooped over an engine, Emma perched on a stool nearby, swinging her legs. The door clanged as she entered the shop. Emma ran up, squealing. Mummy Grace lifted her daughter into a hug, kissing her cheek. "Hello, sweetheart. Did you have fun with Henry?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I got to hold tools, and Henry showed me how to check the tire pressure." Grace grinned, setting Emma down. She then turned to Henry, who was wiping his hands on a grease rag. His face was anxious eyes, scanning hers, as if trying to decipher the outcome of her meeting. So he asked tentatively. Her smile lit up the room. "I took the job." Henry inhaled sharply, his eyes flicking with both pride and heartbreak. "That's wonderful," he said, voice wavering. I'm so happy for you." Grace bit her lip, stepping closer so Emma wouldn't overhear their more serious conversation. "Henry, that's not the whole story," she added quietly. "Mr. Carter is open to providing an investment in Pierce's garage if you're interested in upgrading and expanding." Henry's jaw dropped. What he whispered, his voice pitched high with disbelief. She handed him the brief summary from John Carter. Henry's hands shook as he read. It detailed a potential injection of funds with a low-interest repayment plan to help him buy equipment, hire more mechanics and advertise, all courtesy of the Carter Foundation's new pilot program. How Henry stammered, eyes darting between the document and Grace. "Why would he do this for me?" Grace's eyes sparkled. "Because you saved Emma and me. You gave me shelter, believed in me when I had nothing, and I believe in you. I told Mr. Carter about your business, about your potential. I also told him I'd like to use my new position to help small businesses like yours." Henry's face was a riot of emotions. "Grace," he murmured, voice catching, "I thank you. This is more than—" He took a deep breath, adjusting to the sudden possibility that his dreams could finally come true. Grace placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You don't have to accept right away. There's more paperwork, obviously more steps. But if all goes well, you'll have the resources you need to thrive." Her gaze softened. "And I'm not leaving for Charlotte just yet. I'll be traveling back and forth for a while, getting things set up at the foundation. Mr. Carter said I can work remotely part-time, especially since I'm making Fairhaven our first pilot project." Henry's eyes shone with relief. "So you're not moving out immediately?" She shook her head, a soft laugh escaping. "No, not yet." I still need a few weeks, at least, before I transition. They're fine with me staying here while we arrange everything. Behind them, Emma poked her head around the car. "Mummy, are we moving again?" she asked, anxiety creasing her brow. Grace turned, kneeling down. "Not right away, honey," she explained, her voice reassuring. "We'll be visiting Charlotte sometimes, but for now we still live here." Emma's shoulders relaxed. She looked at Henry with a smile that could melt hearts. "So I still get to see Henry?" Henry grinned, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You bet. And soon we might even get some new tools for the garage. Maybe I'll teach you how to change the oil next." The little girl's face lit up. "Yay!" As Emma scampered off to explore the tool bench, Henry rose, turning to Grace. Their gazes locked, an unspoken electricity humming between them. Slowly, tentatively, Henry reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder for a brief, poignant moment. "Thank you," he breathed, stroking her hair, "for believing in me." A flicker of hope ignited in Grace's chest. "I always will." And there, amid the scent of motor oil and the clang of metal tools, the seeds of a new future took root, one that promised redemption, prosperity, and maybe, just maybe, love. Weeks passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and phone calls. Grace juggled coordinating her new position at the Carter Foundation, traveling to Charlotte for orientation, and returning to Fairhaven to help Henry reorganize Pierce's garage. It was hectic, but it also felt like she was coming into her own, no longer the desperate woman caught in a storm, but a driven professional with a meaningful purpose. Emma adapted well, splitting her time between the local daycare and helping out in the garage with Henry. The townsfolk noticed the improvements too. A fresh coat of paint brightened the exterior of Pierce's garage. A new sign reading Pierce's Garage, in partnership with the Carter Foundation, drew curiosity from locals who had never given the small shop much thought. Slowly, customers trickled in, drawn by the promise of honest work and new services. Still, obstacles remained. The old building needed more renovations than anticipated, draining the initial investment quicker than expected. Grace spent late nights poring over budgets. Henry worried constantly about each expense, questioning whether every purchase was truly necessary. Tensions flared once when the contractor they hired missed deadlines, leaving the garage's new towing bay half-finished. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Grace snapped at Henry in frustration. Henry, feeling guilty about the money, snapped back. They exchanged harsh words that stung both of them. Later that evening, guilt weighed on them. Henry apologized, first offering to cook dinner, a questionable affair, resulting in slightly burned spaghetti. Grace laughed through tears, admitting she was taking on too much. Emma watched them, solemn but hopeful, as they embraced in the kitchen, each acknowledging they were in uncharted waters. Their conflict resolved, they pressed on. By the time the new towing bay was complete, the grand reopening loomed. Flyers advertised the event, Pierce's Garage, new services, new look, same trusted values. On the morning of the grand reopening, Grace dressed Emma in a cute polka dot dress, and Henry wore a freshly pressed shirt, his calloused hands stuffed nervously into his pockets. A small crowd of townspeople gathered outside the garage. John Carter himself arrived, stepping out of a sleek town car with Michael Carlyle by his side. Henry swallowed, nerves dancing in his stomach, but John clapped him on the shoulder and beamed. "Congratulations, Henry. Let's see what you've built." A local reporter snapped photos and asked questions. "Mr. Pierce, how does it feel partnering with such a big foundation?" Henry shy in the spotlight, stammered something about gratitude and a bright future. Grace filled in the blanks, her poise radiating as she explained the community impact they hoped to achieve. They cut a makeshift ribbon-red duct tape strung between two pylons, and the crowd cheered. Henry's eyes misted heart, pounding with pride. This was more than a garage now. It was a beacon of possibility in a small town. He felt the eyes of his late grandfather upon him, smiling from the great beyond at the boy who'd kept the shop alive against all odds. When the cameras and well-wishers eventually dispersed, Henry found Grace leaning against a car in the corner of the lot, gazing into the distance. He approached quietly. "Thank you," he said once more, words woefully inadequate for the magnitude of his feelings. She smiled. "You've said that 100 times today." "Well, I'll say it 100 more," he teased softly. They both looked up at the newly renovated sign, the bright paint glinting in the sunlight. Pride swelled in their chests. "Couldn't have done this without you," Henry murmured. Grace met his gaze, eyes pooling with emotion. "We did this together," she corrected gently. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heart thump beneath her palm. He lifted a calloused hand to cradle hers, his thumb gently brushing her knuckles. In that moment, neither spoke about the future, about Charlotte, or about any next steps. They simply basked in the warmth of accomplishment and the closeness they'd forged through weeks of hard work, trust, and compassion. Around them, Pierce's garage hummed with new life, an emblem of their shared triumph over adversity. That evening, after the rush of the grand reopening, Henry, Grace, and Emma retreated to the small house on the outskirts of town. John Carter had left for Charlotte, with promises to return soon, and to stay closely involved in the expansion's progress. For the first time in a while, the three of them had an evening to relax. Henry built a small fire in the backyard pit, the crackling flames painting golden patterns on their faces. Emma danced around, making up silly songs while Grace and Henry watched with amusement. When Emma finally wore herself out and went inside to watch a cartoon, Henry and Grace remained by the dying embers, side by side in lawn chairs. The night sky glittered with stars, and a soft breeze carried the sound of crickets. Henry glanced at Grace, taking in her delicate profile, bathed in firelight. He felt a tug in his chest, a sense of contentment he hadn't known in years, perhaps ever. Clearing his throat, he looked down at his hands. "Grace," he began, nerves prickling. "There's something I've wanted to tell you. For a while now." She turned, eyebrows lifting in curiosity. "What's on your mind?" He swallowed, heart pounding as if it wanted to leap out of his chest. "We've been through so much together," he said, stumbling on the words. "And I know you have a new life opening up for you in Charlotte, but I don't want to lose what we have here." Grace's eyes flickered with surprise, and something else, hope, maybe. "Henry." He gripped the arms of his chair, forcing himself to continue. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he confessed softly. "Maybe I have been for a while. It's not just gratitude for everything you did. It's more. You and Emma have filled a hole in my life I didn't even know how to fix. I want—" He paused, words choking in his throat. "I want to be with you, and I want to be there for Emma too." Silence settled, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Grace breathed in, sharply, tears glistening in her eyes. "Henry. Oh, Henry." She stood crossing the small gap between their chairs and knelt beside him. Gently, she placed a hand on his cheek. "I never expected to find someone like you. You've done more than save me from a storm. You showed me what genuine kindness and love feel like. She swiped at a tear. I'm falling for you too. Relief and joy surged through him. He let out a shaky laugh, pulling her close. Their lips met in a tender, tentative kiss, the embers of the fire reflecting in each other's eyes. When they pulled apart, Grace's cheeks were wet with tears, but her smile was radiant. Henry's heart pounded as he realized he'd never been happier in his life. She rested her head on his shoulder. I don't want to leave you, she whispered, but I also can't ignore the job in Charlotte. It's our security, our future. He nodded, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. I know. We can figure out the logistics. You could commute for a while, or maybe we open a second location someday. All I know is I don't want to lose you. She gripped his hand tightly. You won't, she promised, eyes glowing with conviction. As long as we hold on to each other, we'll find a way. A hush fell over them as they stared up at the vast North Carolina sky. The fire nearly burned down to embers. In the quiet darkness, they affirmed their love and their hope for a shared tomorrow, whatever shape it might take. Over the following months, Grace thrived at the Carter Foundation. She spent half her week in Charlotte, collaborating with John Carter's team on various community projects. The other half, she returned to Fairhaven, working remotely and staying with Henry and Emma in the little house they'd come to cherish. Though the schedule was demanding, it was a compromise that allowed her to grow professionally and remain close to the man she loved. Pierce's garage continued to evolve under Henry's leadership and Grace's financial know-how. Soon they had hired an additional mechanic and purchased a new tow truck. Local businesses recognized the reliability and honesty of Henry's work, spreading the word far and wide. Even folks from the next county started coming. The once desolate waiting area bustled with customers chatting over free coffee. Emma started kindergarten at the local school, and Henry proudly attended parent-teacher meetings alongside Grace. For the first time, Emma seemed to have a stable routine, and her giggles filled every corner of the house they shared. One crisp morning, as Henry prepared to drive Grace to Charlotte for a big presentation, she hurried into the kitchen, rummaging for a folder she'd misplaced. He watched her from the kitchen table, a soft smile on his face. She was dressed in a sleek blazer, her hair tied neatly, exuding confidence and poise. As she found her missing documents, she spun toward him, relief flooding her face. Got it, she declared, breathless. Now I'm ready. He rose, picking up the car keys. Let's go knock 'em dead. She grinned, pausing briefly to step into his arms. Her lips brushed his, a lingering affection that said more than words could. Thank you, Henry, for everything. He chuckled softly. You say that a lot, he teased. Her eyes sparkled. Because I'm grateful every day. They drove out Emma safely at school, the sun rising over the horizon, bathing Fairhaven in gold. It felt symbolic, like the dawn of a new era in their lives, one forged through hardship storms and the unwavering power of kindness. 6 months later, Grace officially moved her base to a smaller Carter Foundation office that was set up right in Fairhaven, part of the rural initiative to revitalize struggling communities. John Carter himself attended the ribbon cutting of this small satellite office, praising Grace's contributions and reaffirming the Foundation's commitment to local growth. The synergy between the Foundation and Pierce's garage became an inspiring model for how big philanthropy could truly uplift small communities. Finally, after nearly a year of balancing traveling expansions and blossoming love, Grace, Henry, and Emma stood in the yard of Henry's old house, now partially renovated, with Grace's loving touch. As a gentle summer breeze rustled the trees, Henry dropped to one knee, heart thudding in his chest. "Grace Thompson," he said, voice trembling with emotion. "You came into my life in the middle of a storm, and you brought the sun with you. You and Emma have changed everything for me, taught me that hope is worth fighting for. Will you marry me?" Grace let out a tearful laugh, Emma bouncing on her toes beside them. "Yes," Grace exclaimed, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Yes, of course." Emma wrapped her arms around them both, cheering. In that moment, the battered sedan that once hobbled into Henry's garage felt like a distant memory. They had weathered more than a physical storm. They had faced poverty, heartbreak, and fear. And yet they'd emerged stronger together. Henry and Grace shared a kiss, a promise sealed under a bright Carolina sky. Their tale was one of unexpected generosity and a single act of compassion that had spiraled into a life-changing love. Together they stepped forward, ready to continue a story that no longer revolved around survival alone, but around building a future, hand in hand, heart to heart. Through a chance encounter on a stormy night, Henry Pierce and Grace Thompson discovered that one small act of kindness can spark a chain of life-altering events. Their story proves that hope can grow even in the harshest conditions, that success is sweeter when shared with someone you love, and that sometimes the greatest storm is the one that leads you home. Now it's your turn to help this inspiring message travel far and wide. If you found strength, comfort, or joy in Henry and Grace's journey, be sure to like this video, share it with someone who might need a little extra hope, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales. Together we can shine light on the power of compassion and remind each other that life's greatest gifts often appear when we least expect them. Thank you for watching, and remember, kindness can change everything.